In this video, we're going to talk about how to buy a house. Maybe you've heard that on the news, interest rates are starting to drop, but it's maybe, had your interest a little bit, and now maybe you're thinking about, hey, how do I actually buy a house? So in this video, we're going to talk about the process before an accepted offer, after an accepted offer, what even is an offer? So we're going to go over the whole works. So before accepted offer, we'll start over here first. And I talked about this on one of my previous videos, but it comes from before we even start the process. It comes from responsibility. Are you a responsible person enough to own an asset? Doing the due diligence of understanding appliances, spending habits. Do you make on-time payments? Are you responsible with credit card payments, car payments, rent payments if you're renting? So just take a step back and look at yourself that way. I put impulsive spending habits. Like, are you the type of person that says, I gotta buy this? Because if you are, when it gets time to closing, down here you're gonna need funds for closing down payment. And if you're not a responsible person, we'll take a step back first and then be like, I need to fix this before I start the whole process. Okay. Next thing after that, maybe you're responsible, you're ready to start rolling. Now, how are we gonna what's the acquisition process look like of buying this property? Are we gonna finance it? Are you using a loan? If so, do you have a pre-approval letter yet? If not, go ahead and speak with a bunch of lenders, compare rates, kind of see the best thing that qualifies for you. And what type of loan? There's conventional, FHA, VA. What type of loan do you qualify for? Or what loan do you want to use? And if you're not using a loan, maybe you're doing all cash. If it's all cash, there's different price and terms that may be favorable for a cash offer if you have the funds for it. And if you are doing cash, go ahead, instead of a pre-approval letter, it's a POF, a proof of funds. It's basically like the same thing, like, this person has XYZ amount and is, qualified up for this amount. Okay, so now, we're responsible. We understand, we're going to get a loan. What's next? Okay, price points. And we talked about this before in the financing. If we're pre-approved, what are we pre-approved up to? Because we wouldn't want to waste time, looking at properties where we actually can't acquisition it, have the acquisition process start if we can't actually get a loan for it. Okay, now we know what we're approved up to. Now, what monthly payments do you want to have? Like, you may be pre-approved up to $3,000, but do you want the payments that come along with a $300,000? Right? Maybe you want to stick around that $250,000 because the payments would be a lot less. It's kind of how comfortable are you and how much do you want to have your payments to be, plus any hidden fees that come up, and HOA if you're in one of those properties, lot rent if you're going to buy manufactured, that's already on the market. People don't really talk about lot rent. It can be pretty expensive, like $200, plus your mortgage payment, so just add on. And there's other hidden fees that come along also. Okay, now we understand, we're responsible. We're gonna go with a loan. We know what type of loan we're gonna get. We understand what payments we want to use. Now, let's talk about location. Okay, do you want to be close to work? Do you want to drive, 20 miles, 30, 40, 5? Just start taking a step back and think, I understand the price. Now for location, I want to be this far away from my job or this close to family, which is one of the main reasons people move, is to be close to family. Or, God forbid, you're having problems with your family, move away. And school district, do we want to be close to school? What school do we want to be a part of? All that stuff comes in with location. Okay, so now we're responsible. We understand the acquisition process. We understand our price point. Now we know kind of where we want to live, what location. Now it comes into like what style. Okay, so do we want a ranch style house? Do we want a split level, a condo? Or does it not even matter to you at all? Some people are just like, Tanner, just give me a roof above my head and the location that I want, the price that works for me and my family. That's all that I care about. That's a very common thing that happens. Okay, so now we got all this stuff, and now we finally found the house that makes sense, that fills in all these gaps. Now what? Now we submit an offer. What even is an offer? So we're going to go over that right now, and what kind of things entail in it. Okay, so basically an offer is, your request to purchase the house, and there's many, many things that are included in an offer. I'm going to talk about them right now that people don't really talk about besides price and terms. Okay, what is this contingent on appraisal? Meaning, once we get to the appraisal side of the acquisition process, let's just say the house is $300,000 and you have this contingency for appraisal. If it doesn't reach $300,000, then you have a way to exit out of the contract and keep your earnest money. Some people, waive this to potentially get in their house. Okay, because if you have competing offers in and one of the offers that you're going against doesn't have this, depending on the situation, they probably could go ahead and go with that one. So something to think about. How do we want to structure this thing? About the inspection contingency. Okay, do we want to waive the inspection? I generally don't think that's a good idea because things come up that you don't even think about in inspection. And in this contingency, if something comes up in inspection that generally you feel like is a problem, you have a way out of the contract and still keep your earnest money. Okay, what about taxes? Do you want to have gross, like where the seller pays up to this amount, they own the property, and then you take the rest? Okay, there's ways to negotiate that part of the taxes. Okay, what kind of title is it? Is it abstract? An abstract is like a big dinosaur. It's like a dinosaur book that from when the house is put on the dirt and there's a chain of title all the way through. Do we know if it's an abstract or a marketable title, which is the more recent type? Okay, what about home warranty? Do we want home warranty? If so, who pays for it? Because in the contract you can have the seller pays for it all, some of it, the buyer pays for all of it. That's something to go over in an offer when you submit it. Okay, what about reinspection? So let's just say that you have an FHA loan, and one of the things that shows up in an FHA loan that they're kind of picky about when they send the person to look at it is chip paint. Okay, so now we know that there's chip paint on here, and after it's done, they inspect the first time, they fix it, and now they come out there again. Who's paying for the second one? Is it the buyer? Is it the seller? Something in the contract to talk about and discuss. Okay, what about closing date? What does the closing process look like? Do you want to close in the standard time of around 40 days, or do you want to close later than that? Okay, because everyone's motivation is different. Okay, that's something to talk about in the offer when writing it. What about earnest money? How much earnest money do you want to deposit? Typical earnest money is different for each market. Do you want to be close to the average, or do you want to offer more earnest money that would go to the seller if you default on anything that's outside of contingency? Do you want to add more and be like, what, I'm adding double the amount of the earnest money so that they understand that we're serious about this thing, we're serious about buying this property, and if we default for some reason, go ahead and take this for taking it off the market. Take our earnest money because you pulled out the market. Okay, that's something to talk about when it comes to earnest money. What about this sale includes? Do you maybe want the pool table that they have on the pictures of that we looked at on a showing? Do you want that? Or this sale excludes, maybe you don't want something in the backyard or in the living room that you want the seller to take with them. Okay, and then contingencies. There's a bunch of contingencies like lead-based paint, disclosure, property disclosure, water sample, soil sample. There's so many different types of contingencies that you can have in the offer to send over, and if accepted, you have a certain amount of time frame to get that data, and if you're not comfortable with that data, then you can go ahead and exit the contract without losing your earnest money. What about special assessments? People don't really talk about this. That's also something to talk about in the offer. And then you could do a search and see how much special assessments are owed and who wants to pay for it at closing. Something to really talk about. Okay, so now we went through, we're responsible, we understand the acquisition process and we're going to finance it. We understand our price point, our location, the style that we want, we have an offer that looks legit, and now we send it over and booyah, we get accepted. What's next? Okay, after the accepted offer, what happens next? Okay, earnest money. The deposit amount goes into escrow, so maybe you had a $2,000 earnest money. Okay, take that check, goes into escrow, and then it goes towards your down payment at the time of closing. And it stays in there in case you default, then that money gets deposited towards the seller for taking the property off the market. Okay, we got the earnest money deposited. What's next? Inspection. We go ahead and schedule the inspection to happen, and the buyer typically pays for it. Okay, and the inspector, they do their thing, they invoice the buyer for the inspection. And to receive the papers, you pay the invoice and you get it. Okay, so now we deposit earnest money, we got the inspection scheduled. Now what? Title. They send the offer over to title, then they're doing a title search and a lien search to see who actually owns the property, if it's, everything looks legit and fine on their side, and a lien search. A typical lien is like a mortgage payment, and you use the house as collateral in case you default, and it's a lien. Okay, so now we've got the earnest money deposited, the inspection scheduled, the title, they're doing their thing, and contingencies. What's the time frame for contingencies? Okay, get everything going on there, like maybe your sewer sample and all that stuff, your inspection, all part of contingencies. Non-appraisal, because the appraisal and the appraisal could be its own contingency with a different timeline compared to all the other contingencies. There's a bunch of them, so they could be separate. Okay, the time frame for all the contingencies that necessarily aren't the appraisal. Okay, you have a time frame specifically for that, and did anything show up in that time frame? If so, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And yeah, if anything comes in that time frame with the contingencies, you have a way out of that with your earnest money. Be like, what? The inspector came and I just do not want to deal with this thing, even though that the seller is going to give some credits and negotiations. I just had enough. I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to walk away. And you still get to keep your earnest money. Okay, so now we got through the earnest money inspection, title, contingencies. Now we're on the appraisal. Okay, the appraisal's scheduled, and is it satisfactory? Okay, if the house was $300,000, did it appraise for $300,000? If yeah, sweet. If not, well then we start in this next section here, which is negotiations. Okay, so the inspection comes in negotiation. Okay, maybe something came up like, I don't know, there's something wrong with the siding on the house. Okay, and you get in negotiations, and the seller's like, what? I'll just go ahead and give a credit towards closing to cover that expense. Okay. And that's maybe one thing. There's many things that can happen in inspection. For example, that's just one that I chose. And the appraisal. Okay, maybe it comes in low. And I made a video about this yesterday, about some certain things that you can do with the appraisal. Like maybe if it's $300,000 and it appraises for $280, maybe the seller brings down the price to $280, maybe not all the way to that $280. Maybe the buyer's like, cool with it. I'll bring that extra $20K to close. If not, and then another thing here that I really like to talk about is leverage. Who has the leverage in the situation? Because depending on the buyer's motivation, the seller's motivations, you really have an upper leg when it comes to leverage. Like maybe the seller already has stuff moved out, they're ready to rock and roll in their next property, and they can't put it back on the market. Then the buyer has a lot of leverage because they could walk away. And if it in the contingency, you could walk away and keep your earnest money. So it puts the seller on like, I can't put this thing really back on the market. It'll just be a complete mess. So they go ahead and cover some of the things that happen in inspection, the appraisal. And that's just if the buyer has a leverage. It could be flipped, or maybe it's in the middle and you just meet in the middle for common ground. Okay, so now we deposit earnest money, the inspection's done, the title's done, the contingency's cool, appraisals all satisfactory or not satisfactory, and went through negotiations and everything on here were done. And now we finally make it to closing. So what actually happens in closing? People don't really talk about that much. So title pays off the previous mortgage. If, let's just say that there's a mortgage for the house that you're buying, okay, the funds that they received from the offer and whatnot, they pay everything to make it all good and satisfactory for the next person buying it, and then transfers ownerships, and if there's any liens, that stuff gets settled there also, and you have to bring closing costs to closing as well. Okay, so now closing costs are good, the ownership is transferred, liens are paid off, everything's all settled on that way, and now you just got handed the keys to your new property, and you have a smiley face. So hopefully you found this video very well, and if there's any questions you have on the process, because there's a lot in the offer that I could dive more into detail if people want to learn more about it, or maybe you have a question on contingency. Tanner, make a video about contingencies. I want to learn more about it. It's really interesting to me. Cool, perfect. I'll go ahead and do that. And yeah, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions about buying or selling real estate, don't be afraid to give me a call at 701-833-0517. and I'm also a real estate agent at Brokers 12. So thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye.